Hey, Pretentious Engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but I help engineers, global leaders, and entrepreneurs find their way. The journey of an engineer is often disorienting, undefined, and isolating, and I've made it my personal mission to provide greater clarity, a bounded career path, and community to folks like myself hoping to secure their next best opportunity. After over a decade advancing surgical robotics, device innovation, and VR at Johnson & Johnson, I made a strategic exit to continue my family's journey in Japan. This was one of the most challenging decisions I've ever made in my life. Many folks get stuck in jobs that don't have their best interests in mind, and my flagship course, How to Say Goodbye, will empower you to craft your own strategic exit, targeting an opportunity at a 30% pay increase, living wherever you desire, and loving what you do. I genuinely believe that this is possible for you, and my community on Skool is here to support you in your journey. Many colleagues of mine struggled to discern how my wife and I were able to navigate various immigration, housing, financial, and employment risks during our strategic exit. So I decided to synthesize everything we've learned so you can progress out of that job that's killing you inside. This course is broken into 3 major movements, the first of which, inertia, illuminates all the constraining forces that keep you in a job that doesn't have your best interests in mind, limiting your future possibilities. The second movement, impact, which will start today, acknowledges an intentional choice to break through these inertial forces in pursuit of securing your next best opportunity. The final movement, momentum, contains the secret sauce of how I exited J&J with my 2 greatest assets intact, my integrity and my network. I'm committed to helping you exit with both so your reputation will prosper, leading to downstream opportunities. So, is everyone replaceable? Let's find out together. Ikimasho, let's go. As an aging millennial, I grew up with participation trophies and this sense that I could do anything when I grow up. That in life we get to choose our own adventure. So I became an engineer, joined the second largest healthcare company in the world, and quickly realized that a corporate career is a little bit less than a choose your own adventure. It feels a lot more like one of those squishy aliens in Toy Story, waiting for senior leaders to recognize their talent and pluck them with the claw. Whether it's a promotion leading to an epic new project or a global assignment, we get stuck in the claw machine, waiting and watching others get chosen instead of us. Meanwhile, we get shackled with golden handcuffs that restrain our willingness to jump out of the heating pot, to break free and restore our sense of dignity, to resolve that enough is enough. I can do better elsewhere. It's time for my strategic exit. The reality is that in business, everyone is replaceable, but your life is not. But an exit, especially after many years in an organization, is challenging. So let's cement our resolve today and focus on finding our why. So let me pick up my tablet and let's get to work. All right, I got my tablet. Let's get to work. So there was a crazy day where I finally made the decision it's time to leave Johnson & Johnson. And when I say I made the decision, me and my wife made this decision. It was incredibly complex how we got there, but we went through this exercise that I called finding our why, as well as listing our fears. And I'll share a link to this picture in the Skool page as well. But basically, on a whiteboard, I wrote down the 5 whys of why I thought exiting Johnson & Johnson was the right decision, even though it was incredibly challenging to make this decision. My wife wrote down her 5 whys, and many of them overlapped with mine, but some were nuanced based on her life and what made sense to her. And then the final thing we added at the top of this image was listing all of our fears, because we felt like we were swirling around sponsorship, concerning visa, finances, healthcare. And we thought these were all going to be solvable problems. And the majority of them were, some of them were not. So right now you might have noticed a change in scenery. We actually live in Chicago now. We exited Johnson & Johnson, did 6 months of all-in entrepreneurship in the Tokyo startup scene. And then our revenue did not overcome our burn rate based on high schooling costs for our kids. So we made a challenging choice to pull our kids out of school. We did a full relocation to Chicago on our own dime. And now we're doing a restart here. So I'm currently looking for global leadership opportunities in Chicago doing entrepreneurship in parallel through our community on Skool. And then eventually the goal is to split live between Chicago with family and in Tokyo. So lots have changed since this defining moment of exiting Johnson & Johnson about 6 months ago exactly. Is that really true? Yeah, it's been a crazy 6 months. I mean, we made the choice about 9 months ago because there's a lead time associated with it. So what I want to walk through is the 5 whys I found, not my wife's, some of the fears that we had, and then we'll go through an exercise that you can work through so that if you're truly making the choice to exit, if you're recognizing your life is not replaceable, you only got one shot, right? How do you cement that decision 100% so that you could do the difficult steps that lie ahead? Because this journey actually gets harder. It got harder for us. It'll get harder for you. If you've been in an organization for a while, it's difficult to take the jump. So the first why that I had, let me double check my ink color is blue. Yep, that'll work. Was stability. Stability for the kids. So we navigated 12 relocations in 1 year to get to Japan. If it sounds unfathomable, it's because it is. It was incredibly challenging for us, and it truly changed the tone of our home. Like, we lived in a migrant fashion with 4 children, and establishing roots was something we desperately thought we needed in that season before leaving J&J. And for me, it was really important for my kids to keep friendships. Like, we had only lived in Japan for about 2.5 years at this point, but our kids were finally getting settled, and I saw their sense of self improving based on the schooling they were in, the friendships they had, and I didn't want them to lose that anchor in their life. So for me, it was important that if we exit Johnson & Johnson, we find a way to create enough income to keep them in international schooling with their existing friends. It didn't make sense to homeschool our kids because there's too many of them in one space while I'm working remote in my room. And it didn't make sense to put them in Japanese schooling. So the first why I had was, let's provide stability for our kids and keep them where they're at. That's the first goal. Second one was momentum. Momentum. No boomerang. So the offer Johnson & Johnson made me, which I'll share a little bit more on, required us to move to New Jersey. And New Jersey was 10 hours away from our family, and it was for an unknown amount of time. So we'd live in New Jersey for 1 to 4 years, start over with new friendships, going back to the stability with kids, and then I'd likely try to move somewhere else with J&J or leave J&J and go somewhere where I could get paid more equitably, because that was still a problem, and then work at that company for an unknown amount of time before there was a global opportunity to get us back to Japan. So when we started thinking about how could we continue life in Japan, this boomerang had so much uncertainty around it. We go to New Jersey. Are we in New Jersey for 3 years, 2 years, 5 years? If it's 5 years, then my son Hezekiah becomes 12. Like 14, you're pushing high school and it becomes really challenging. So we had all these concerns that if we left the country now with Johnson & Johnson, it was completely uncertain if a boomerang would present itself either from J&J, which I was skeptical about just based on all the scarcity the organization was experiencing, but also would I be able to jump to another company in Japan immediately, which now I've learned is probably actually possible. But at the time, we were really concerned about losing momentum on our family's journey towards Japan and staying in Japan, which is why we took the exit. Third one, similar to the kids, continuity of friendship. Something really cool happened when my son Akio was born. Our son Akio was born in Japan. My wife navigated, and this will sound crazy, 14 days of labor with 5 attempted inductions, completely unexpected, turbulent, challenging labor and delivery. And our international circle of friends really provided for us, as well as my father-in-law actually flew out to Tokyo, which was wild. And there was something in that moment because that occurred as I was making the decision whether or not we're going to stay in Japan beyond parental leave. where I just recognized this group of individuals is really exceptional. And we've built something legitimate since living in Tokyo for 2.5 years. And I want to choose proximity to my friends. I want to continue to have them over for dinners and go on experiences together across Tokyo. And it was a huge desire not to just sever that and start out over in New Jersey. Like I felt really apathetic about that, even though I'm sure there's great people in New Jersey. I had finally had like real awesome adult friends that I felt like I could share great conversations with and co-parent our kids with and have experiences with. And many of them were in really interesting circles of business and entrepreneurship, which was new to me. People that were actually able to afford to put their kids through international schooling independently was wild. Um, so there's a lot of reasons that we wanted to stay. And that was a big why for me, was to continue the experiences we were having with those friends. Okay, next one. This is one you've probably picked up on. This is what a lot of this course is really based on. But an immediate transition. I'm spelling it wrong. Too many S's. I'm an engineer. From J&J. And my wife really helped me uncover this one, that I had given so much over 10 years. I'd progressed so much and served so much just to have a change in leadership completely unravel our life, that it was time to say goodbye. And that decision wasn't out of bitterness or rage. It was just time. I have a lot of gratitude for a decade at Johnson & Johnson and what I've gleaned from that, the experiences I've had, them rotating me out to Japan and giving me the opportunity to lead. But at the same time, getting burned by the indifference of an organization that was unable to make the decision I felt was right. Like seeing so many senior leaders paralyzed to not be able to just give me a bridge role for 6 months while the organization resets so my family could stay out here till, year-end planning happens to extend it again. Like I appealed to an insane amount of people within the organization and no one could get it done. Like it was time. And I learned so much through that pain because my career was on my side for a large portion of it. And then going out in this global venture is where I realized that I can do better somewhere else. There's something else for me out there at another company or getting a startup off the ground or doing my own thing. And it's time. So that was a big why for me. It was very hard for me to put that down because I really planned on being a lifer at Johnson & Johnson. You might wrestle with that a lot if you put this as one of your whys, right? Okay. And the reason I wrote immediate transition is I didn't want to take the better financial route of go to New Jersey and work for the person that burned me, or that's how I perceived it at the time. They were navigating their own organizational constraints, but I didn't want to be within their organization in a job that was a fifth lateral move and ride that out till I can quit and find something else. Like it was like now. The nowness was very important. Okay, and then the last one for me, I love our life here. I loved Japan. I loved the people. I loved the language. I loved the culture. I loved learning how to move throughout this context with my family and the experiences we had. And I genuinely just didn't want to see it end. So those were my 5 whys. My wife's were very similar. Hers was like stability and safety for the kids. I'll share the document. She also had like, instead of immediate transition from J&J, hers was like an ideal way to jumpstart her career. So she was trying to get in teaching at the international schools, which also would have subsidized their tuition. So that's another plan that didn't work out just based on hiring processes and timing. Lots of things didn't go as planned. And then the other thing that we'll get to in praxis, but I'll just kind of share verbally, is we had a list of every problem we had to solve, like the fears that we're navigating. We have a fear of how are we going to do medical insurance in Japan? How are we going to secure the right cash flow to keep our kids in school? We had all of these. And again, I'll share that in the Skool post so you can navigate, because we wanted to tether our decision making, ground our decision making on we have these deep-seated whys on why we're moving forward with this hard choice, And anytime a fear or anxiety shows up to shake us, we need to approach that as something we have to push through and figure out. We have to have a figure out mindset if we're going to exit our US sponsored company that kept us in Japan and just venture out and trust that we can make it work. We also have the faith context driving us, which became messy as well. So let's get into praxis. Those are my whys for my exit. I'm curious to hear yours if you're making the decision, to approach your life as if it's not replaceable and go have another experience somewhere else, right? So the praxis, the first one, what is your why for a strategic exit? And you'll post this on the community page. And then I'm really excited to kind of read through this and just help support you in that, to add content on it. I'm sure the rest of the community will wrap around you as well in that. The next one, what are your fears as you transition? There's something you're going to have to move forward from. There's a golden handcuff you have to break. There's a factor that's boiling the pot that you have to say, yes, that's too much of a factor. I don't consent to this anymore. And there are some consequences of the choice you make, as well as great benefits or rewards. So navigating the fears and listing them here is really, really important, because on the next module, we're going to talk through, if I scroll ahead for a second, yes, we're going to talk about how to plan your exit. And a lot of this is leveraging systems engineering risk management techniques to look at those fears and try to figure out what's the worst thing that can happen and how do you mitigate each one of those fears with action. So rather than swirling in fear and anxiety and then ending up staying because it's safe and comfortable, you're going to have to face those and burn them down one at a time. For us, we had a 10-week transitional exit plan with everything from housing, because our housing was leased by Johnson & Johnson. So we knew we had to move and secure our own lease, which has huge risks of us being internationals. How do we do that? We'll find out in the next module, right? We had to figure out health insurance. We had to figure out cash flow. We had to figure out schooling for our kids. So there's all these different things we had to figure out. And by following the fear, but then mitigating it with a plan, that became very powerful. So you're going to take whatever you write here for fears and leverage it in the next module. And then the third one, what are you willing to sacrifice to build the life you desire? I had to sacrifice being a lifer. I had to sacrifice stability. I had to sacrifice economics. Like, our finances were ravished by this. We're still navigating the financial fallout in Chicago. Like, we're trying to figure out, how do we set ourselves up to rent, because now we got to pay down the $75K personal loan we took to keep our kids in international school. And then when we pulled them, we got a portion of that reimbursed, that we immediately spent $20K on international shipment of our goods to Chicago. Like, these were all risks and sacrifices we made to continue life in Japan and to step into entrepreneurship. But we didn't know where they would all land, but we knew the risks associated with them, and we hoped for a different outcome. But now I love living in Chicago with family. It's actually super cool. So that's, life unfolding in beautiful, unexpected ways. For you, you need to figure out, what are you going to have to sacrifice? Is it your best friend that you have lunch with once a week at work? How do you bring that friend with you? There'll be a module on that. But think about it, because something has to be sacrificed to step towards something new. Or at least that's my opinion. All right, friends, that's all I got for today. Keep changing the world. You could sip on that, and we'll get to work on module 5 very, very soon. Keep changing the world.